Philip, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Starting Over podcast. I am very much looking forward to this conversation and happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great.
So, people come to you when they have questions about where to take their future and are seeking some clarity. And it made me think of a video that I saw recently by Oprah Winfrey, and she was asked to what she credits her own success. And she said, knowing what I want. And it's remarkable because I think so many of us, we get hung up on how to do life well without actually pausing to really consider what our priorities are and what we really want out of life. Do you agree with that?
Mm. I would. Often in the work I do, I will come across somebody who's got an open loop with a relationship or a challenge in a relationship. And they are very comfortable in the bitchy zone, like, bitching about the person, bitching about the status quo, bitching about what happened to them, what they did to them, and everything else, and not putting a value on the openness of it, the cost of the uncertainty of it. And I'll often say, but what is it that I hear all the things that happened and I hear all the things you don't want, but what is it that you want? And it's often they don't know what to say after that. They'll go, but and I go, but what do you want from the relationship? They go, but that's not possible. You don't know them. And I go, what do you want from the relationship? And I think a lot of people don't focus on that as a simple. And I don't know Oprah's work and I don't know a lot of her philosophy, but I would agree with that. I think if you know what you want, I think you walk out every day with the words to accompany, to accompany that, the intention to accomplish that. And I think you're certainly stacking the deck in your side if you have a better sense of what you want. But what I will say is most people will come to me saying they don't know what they want. And my experience of that, with the greatest love and respect, is bullshit. I think we all know what we want. We're just afraid to put words and language to it because it means a lot of other things as a result of that.
I think sometimes we should shift this conversation and ask, what would we do if we had a little bit more courage?
Mm, exactly. Exactly. Courage. And I'm not just saying this because I use the word brave in a lot of our work, and Braveheart Media is our company, etc. But I think we put a lot of emphasis on action, on, the execution. And we put a tremendous amount of energy and effort on the requirement and the need for clarity in order to take that action. But the step before that, and you're the first person I've ever heard nail that, in my opinion, because when I say nail it, I think it's the prerequisite to everything, and that is courage. So let's just say I'm sitting in a place I don't want to be. I'm sitting in a job I don't want to do. I'm sitting running a business that might be aligned, but I'm not doing it in the way that serves me. It's not about getting the clarity and the execution. It's about having the courage to stop and go, is this working? Is this serving me? Is this what I want to do? Is this the way I want to be perceived or seen or do or whatever? And that courage piece is so undervalued. And the courage is just to stop and ask yourself a better set of questions than perhaps you've been asking yourself to date.
I love that. And I think the pause and the asking better questions is so important.
100%.
And we often
100%.
don't do it enough, right?
No, exactly. Yeah, I think great questions can really penetrate the intellect, and it can bypass the intellect into a more meaningful place in our bodies and our hearts and our minds. I also think the location of those questions. So the difference between on a tube in London, on a beach in Croatia, and walking in the mountains of Switzerland. And also, I think, and I would of course say this because I do coaching, and I think you do coaching as well, so you'd probably agree with this. Also, to have somebody there to either call bullshit gently or to compassionately put their arm around you, to have someone who's going to challenge the narrative that you're trying to tell yourself, that you're trying to sell yourself. And most of us in this world surround ourselves with people who tell us what we want them to say, or our families who go, it's going to be okay. It's only, you're amazing. You're amazing. And sometimes it's not going to be okay. And sometimes you're not so amazing. And your amazingness has been hidden from the world and it's dormant and it has yet to be seen. So I think it's a combination of great questions in the right environment, being supported and challenged by the right people.
I want to come to a little bit of your own starting over because you have had 5 different careers. You've moved to multiple different countries. You have climbed up a ladder, or at least this is my interpretation of it, that you've climbed up a specific ladder only to realize that it was the wrong one and it left you feeling empty and unfulfilled. And you're now doing work that you said fills your soul, that lights you up and it's what you wish you were doing all along.
Hmm. There's sadness there because I think for me, the sadness that I feel as you say that is coming up for me is why more people can't or won't give themselves permission to do that. But also I think the sadness is the pain that I went through trying to find or uncover who I am and what I've been put on this earth to do. And it was so fucking obvious. I mean, it was so obvious that I went out of my way to make it more complex and difficult. I mean, I literally said to you a few minutes ago, this is nothing's changed. I'm doing exactly what I did when I was 10, when I was 12, when I was 14. I think I've maybe become a little bit more sophisticated. Maybe I've become a little tiny bit more smarter, maybe hopefully a bit more aware. But it was always there. But I just chased all these narratives and societal expectations. And I allowed my insecurity to drive so much of my decision making because I was so insecure. I had so little confidence. I was so yearning to be seen and to be accepted that I did anything and everything I could possibly muster to achieve that. But it actually forced me to betray myself. So I actually moved away from who I was in that journey rather than more closely aligned to who I'm meant to be and always was meant to be. So as you say that, it does bring up an awful lot of emotion inside of me.
Thank you for the honesty with that. And I think a lot of people have found themselves in that situation at some point in their life, if they're not in that situation now. Because going back to what we said before, it does take immense courage to be authentic and to live an authentic
Mm,
life that is not bound by the expectations of your entourage or by the dominant societal narrative. It's
mm.
a lot of courage. Did you have a moment where you realized, I've got to change?
Yeah, I think I had one that stands out, and it's one that I've shared a number of times. It was a best man speech. And it wasn't even around change, it was around what I would call the gifts that we have, a kind of a sense of giftedness. But getting to recognize there was something inside of me that perhaps I wasn't able to fully articulate or see or want to put language to. And I remember coming off a stage after doing a best man speech and having a standing ovation, and a lot of people might go, wow, that must have been incredible. It was actually one of the worst things ever because I was so kind of embarrassed and I thought I'd taken the attention of the wedding and etc. But a complete stranger walked up to me and looked me straight in the eyes and with tears rolling down his face.
Mm.
I've never met him before and I've never met him since. And he says, if I ever get married, will you be my best man? And I told him in no uncertain terms where to go with that, as we do in Ireland.
Yes.
And Australia is not far behind. And as we broke the embrace, because he hugged me, he looked at me and he said, you've got a gift. And I tried to shy away and he looked at me and he said, you've got a gift. And I'll never forget the way he said it, not just what he said, but the way in which he said it. I had heard different nuances of that before, but I've been able to dismiss them because it was my mother or my dad, my cousins, whatever, friends. I didn't want to see it, but this guy kind of just it landed differently for me. So that was the first time I started to awaken to this idea of giftedness and within myself, never mind humanity. But I was very slow to act upon it. It was years later before I kind of revisited this and started to get a sense of what this man experienced. Because what I will say is often it takes a complete stranger to see something in you that you are unwilling to see in yourself or unable to see in yourself. And it's often our loved ones, with all their greatest intentions, actually keep us down. And it's not because they want to, they just don't want us to change. And in order to grow, in order to be, to become, to show up in the world, we have to change. But again, the circumstances we're in, the environment we surround ourselves with, and the people, they know us in a particular way, and we know it in a particular way. So sometimes we need to leave the very places that we have inhabited most of our lives to figure out who the fuck we really are. In your case, maybe Switzerland. In my case, I needed to go to Canada. I needed to go to the United States, not because I wanted to, but almost I had this compulsion to get away from what I knew to figure out who I was. And I'm not suggesting everybody needs to do that. And in some ways, I'm suggesting everyone needs to do that.
Mm.
But based on circumstances and availability and so on and so forth.
And I think something that points to is the importance of environmental change in changing ourselves. Going back to what you
Mm,
said before, I think it can be really hard to break out of the mold when you're stuck in a certain routine every day
correct.
in the familiar environment. And to maybe sometimes the clarity that you're seeking can come when you zoom out, when you change your
Mm,
environment, when you widen your perspective, and when you have novel experiences.
agreed.
Mm.
100%. Absolutely. Some of the greatest moments of my life are when I traveled to South America. I've been to 85 countries. I only know that more because my kids took out a map one day and they said, "Right, mom and dad, who's the winner in the countries?" And of course, we're quite a competitive family,
You haven't got
and we
one of these
count
scratch
all.
marks, have you? That
No, I haven't got one of those, and, but it's not about the amount of countries, it's about deep experiences within those countries, and I can tell you on one hand, 3 or 4 or 5 experiences that shaped me in ways that I'm aware of and in ways that I still haven't processed completely.
Mhm. What do you think of this idea that clarity comes from action and not thought?
I would agree with that. I think that what I said earlier on was bravery or courage, to ask better questions can lead to the clarity that we're seeking. But in the absence of clarity, I think we need to take action. So it's a quote, a statement, "In the absence of clarity, take action." And I think there is nothing quite like taking action. But the problem when it comes to action, people make it Mount Everest and they make it enormous and they make it permanent. So to me, experimental action is brilliant. So I'm a great experimenter.
Love that.
I love experimentation because experimentation is simply nothing other than what it says on the tin. It's an experiment. It either works or it doesn't. And I'll often launch with great energy and great effort a new program, a new retreat, and I'll launch it, and people go, "I'll sign up to the next one," and I'll go, "Well, there may not be a next one," and they think it's a marketing ploy. And our clients that are really close to us and believe in our work and revisit our work every few years, they feel like they've gotten stale or they need to reconnect with themselves and their higher purpose or whatever it is. They'll often say, "I'm going to go in this one because knowing you, it may not ever appear again." And that has happened so many times in my work, simply because I will try something that I feel intuitively drawn to. I then hope people will respond to it. But if it doesn't fully align to who I am as a person, it doesn't matter how the market responds, even if it takes off. I will shut that shit down because if it doesn't light me up, I'm not serving anybody and it will never end up working. So, to me, on a very simple scale, the way I see this most prevalent, and I'll just use Las Vegas because it's not a city I like. No disrespect to your clients or your community that listen to there from there, but it's if I'm living in Las Vegas and I don't want to live there, people often are stifled with, I just don't know where to move, and I go, well, the answer is anywhere but here. If you don't like it, if you love it, great. Well, then you're not even having the conversation. But if you don't like Vegas and it doesn't light you up, and it doesn't stir your soul, and it's an environment that doesn't bring you alive or offer something to you, it's going to kill you very, very slowly. And then people often say, "But I don't know what's next." And I go, "Well, anywhere." But if I move to Portland and I buy a house, I go, "Hang on, who mentioned buying a house? Why didn't you just go to Portland for a month? Why didn't you go to Switzerland for a month? Why didn't you go to Ireland just for a month or a week and just begin to feel into places without buying a house, getting a mortgage, and creating a prison cell in the next place for you?" So I think we jump too quickly and we commit too wholeheartedly. So to me, experiment, experiment, experiment. And the last thing I'll say to this, often with people will say, "I want to get on that stage that you spoke on," or "I want to, be on that podcast with that lady who lives in Switzerland with a funny accent," or whatever. Or
Hey,
"I
you
want to,
welcome my accident.
yeah, I can't knock your accent. And "Or I want to run retreats like you do." And I go, "Yeah, great. Start with one client." And they go, "No, no, no, you're not listening." And I go, "No, no, I listened perfectly. You just don't like my answer. Just start with one person, one conversation, 1 hour, and just see and let it unfold from there." And I think that's the most authentic, aligned way to begin to playfully move towards the thing that lights you up or doesn't. And either way, you've got clarity.
Quick pause. If you're a regular listener to the show and you have found value in these episodes, I would be immensely grateful if you pledged your support. Reality is, podcasting is not a free venture. There are many behind the scenes costs. But with your support, you'll be able to help me fuel the growth of this podcast and keep bringing you bigger and better guests each and every week. And of course, the signature honesty and real talk, which I'm known for. So if you'd like to say thanks and support the show for less than a cup of coffee per week, you can click the link called Patreon in the show notes. Thanks so much in advance, guys. Back to the episode. Oh, so good. And I love that you just mentioned play. I think it's
Yeah.
the forgotten piece. And for anyone, hands up here, who falls into the category of being fearful of making the wrong decision,
Yeah.
and then you to spend way too long trying to make
Mm.
the decision because you want to make sure it's the right one, you
Yeah.
you lose all sense of play, lightness, fun,
Mm.
experimentation in it.
Absolutely.
And it's miserable. Why do we do this
Mhm.
to ourselves, Philip?
It's funny. I remember being in India. I don't bring groups to India anymore. But years ago, I brought a group to India. Why? Because I wanted to go. And somebody said, and they checked in with the local tour guide that we had and their company, and they said, "So did you guys provide this agenda?" I said, "No, this guy's a bit of a weirdo," meaning me. So this guy contacted us in our country, and he told us where he wanted to go with the group, and then we just managed it accordingly. So I knew where I was drawn to, and they filled in the gaps. And this lady said, how do you figure out these agendas and these locations and where we're going and what we're doing?" And I'm looking at my watch and I said, the bus is pulling up in 5 minutes and it's pretty complex. So I'll do my best to kind of sum it up. And she goes, "Oh, that'd be great." I said, "I pick a place I want to go. I outline the things that I want to do, and I invite the people I want to hang out with." And she looked at me with a combination of absolute frustration that you can't be that selfish, and admiration because I was that selfish. And of course, it is based on, I suppose, the things that I wish I had done, the things that I knew would make me grow as a person, and in turn make the people coming grow. It's, in other words, rather than going off and building an complete experience that I think might help the world. Of course, my work is the premise of my work is helping people get out of their own way and stretch. And that's a given doing what I do. But within that, if I'm not lit up by what I do and where I go, the group will not be lit up. They won't get the best version of Philip McKernan, who in that case is their guide. So to me, a lot of it is about what lights me up, what intrigues me, what scares the shit out of me. So one thing that scares the shit out of me is dance, because I have this story that I can't dance. So the first night we arrive in India, in Delhi, we went Bollywood dancing or whatever the hell it's called. I looked like a complete idiot. But you know what? So did everybody else.
Oh,
And
that's
that came out of that was, I hate doing things I'm not good at. One girl with tears rolling down her face. Another guy said, "I don't do things with my daughter that I'm not proficient at." But actually, I'm depriving her of these incredible opportunities. And I open in front of the group. So that's the first time I've danced in front of a group of people since I was 18. And I was drunk because I needed alcohol to do that. And before you know it,
right.
Bollywood goddamn dancing set the tonality for the entire week. And then we got into the real work and the real weeds. So to me, if we're not being lit up by what we do, where we live, the relationships that we're in, the conversations that we're having, you can do one thing. You can wait for the world to transform and to meet you, or you can go out there and transform as it relates to the world. And that is my philosophy. I never sit still in that regard. I'm always moving. But I hope I create enough space in my life to sit still within the context and the container of the relationship with myself. And I think that's the difference.
Such an important takeaway. I think back, I had this random memory of being a teenager. You mentioned Indian dancing. I used to love that when I was a kid for some reason. No idea. And I would be in my bedroom. I put spare change in my pocket so that I sounded so I could do the belly dancing and shake it around and
Uh,
sound and be like, imagine I'm doing the Bhangra and in the middle of, I don't know, Diwali festival or something.
well, I've got time right now. I mean, if you want to put the mic away and we can just
Break out. Why not? Why not? And then I recently went to a salsa class and I thought, wow, how I lost the sense of play because I was there fixating on how I could know the steps well and I wasn't doing the steps right. And then it was frustrating. And I remember thinking, where is that girl who could put spare change in her pocket and shake and dance in the bedroom like no one cared. I didn't care. And it's yeah,
yeah.
again, it's the playful element, but it brings us such vibrancy.
Yeah.
And I think at some point we're all seeking that. We're seeking a more vibrant life. We say happy, but it's like you want to feel alive and energized.
Mhm.
And I
100%.
get that a lot from what you're sharing.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of us think, not even think, but believe deep down that there are huge segments of our life that kind of vibrancy, that kind of aliveness is just not available. It's available to the few. That it's not available through chunks of my life, for example, the work that we do. And I disagree wholeheartedly. I mean, my work, my wife will often say, where's funny Philip? Because I have a tendency to get too serious because of the seriousness of the work that I'm doing in the context of that this work is really important, but it doesn't mean it needs to be serious. So I think I'm more playful. So I do these calls once a month with our community, and my sense of humor is I think I'm so fucking funny. And I don't mean arrogantly funny, as in, I don't care anymore whether someone thinks I'm funny. I don't need them to laugh in order to create an environment where I laugh. And if they don't like my sense of humor, if they don't like me picking on them, if they don't like me making funny comments, then I'm just not their guy. Move on, find somebody else that is.
Mm,
And I'm having so much more fun. But our clients or our community are commenting. I'm loving the humor. I'm loving the funny guy. I'm loving whether I'm funny or not. It's all relevant, but it's relative. But they're noticing that I'm more relaxed and having more fun. And I just think that can be applied to so many things. And I think the Aussies are up there as well, but the Irish are world class at taking the piss out of themselves or making fun of themselves.
yeah.
Um,
So true,
but
and I
I
think
think
we've I think we've already got
it can
the
cross the
record of the
line.
amount of, swear words on one podcast so far.
Yeah,
Showing the
exactly.
islander. No, kids actually, I think, really help with that. I was practicing a speech the other day, set up my tripod in the living room, put the camera out, and was holding my son. And all the while I was recording, I'm there seriously practicing, because this is important. And then he was just doing the most ridiculous faces, like, and then turning his head and turning back at the camera and making loads of silly noises. And I thought, wow, play,
Yeah.
lighten up, Shannon. Goodness sake. Ah, man. So,
But I think that's a great example, Shannon. Sorry if I can just, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and we don't have to talk about this necessarily, but even that question, where is that little girl gone? And I
mm,
think that is such a profoundly important question. And I think for anyone listening that can relate to some aspect of what you or I shared, that has a part of themselves that they've left behind, the girl or the boy that used to pick up the paintbrush and paint, not for recognition, but because they loved it. The boy or the girl that used to play the piano, the boy or the girl that used to read, silly adventure books that have no real productivity purpose to them in the world today. Where is, I think that is one of the most profound questions. Where's that little guy gone? Where's that little girl gone? And I think I would encourage anyone to get out a journal and ask that question, and to to
mm,
to to, to listen to what comes. And again, I haven't shared this, but I had I'm 51, Shannon, and I have done a fair bit of work on myself, and I have so much work to do on myself in some respects. And I've done all this idea of, your inner child and looking at yourself and abandonment and everything else and all these other stuff. And I remember once reading something or someone saying the idea of getting a picture of yourself as a young child and putting it next to your bed. And I did it and I went, oh, there, I did it now. I ticked the box. And I had this photograph beside my bed of myself at around 10 or 12 or whatever. And I could just never connect with it. I could never, I tempted to, I'd look at it, I'd stare at it, I'd meditate at it, I'd say nice things. I tried all the tricks and the different things. And last year, when I let go of the need to kind of find any type of connection to that picture, I found myself walking a 5,000-year-old road in the west coast of Ireland with a group of clients behind me. And normally I'd be in my head a little bit more than normal, thinking about where I need to stop, what questions, what's going on for Betty, what's going on for John, where's Henry out in his journey, etc. And I just dropped and I was just super just connected to myself. And I had this overwhelming feeling that I was on the road and someone was walking right next to me. And I look over to my right and I can literally picture my 10-year-old self. And he's walking along beside me and he's just looking up. And it was the first time that I've ever been able in 51 years. Now I can sit here and judge myself for that, or I can applaud the courage it took to allow that situation emerge in my life. And this little, and I may lose some of your audience at this point, but so be it. This little 10-year-old was looking at me, and it was the first time he showed up in my life. And I felt that I had abandoned him and that he had abandoned himself. And it was up there with probably two or three of the most extraordinary moments of my entire existence on this earth. So I'm really struck with this question. Where's that girl gone? Where's that little girl gone? The girl dancing in her room, and I can kind of picture it with the change in her pocket, which is super innovative, by the way, brilliantly creative,
Thank you.
dancing away, not giving a shit what the world thinks. Where's she gone? And I think that is such a beautiful question for you, for me, for your audience to sit with, because I think all of us have left parts of us behind. And when we go back into the past and we bring those parts of us together, we become more complete in the moment and we know exactly what it is that we need from the world and we need and to provide for the world. That's my experience wholeheartedly every time.
And yet, I hear people saying or thinking, but I need to be responsible. And how does this philosophy or view on how you show up in life, how is that compatible with the responsibilities of everyday life, of work, of the household, of managing competing responsibilities in our lives?
Yeah, if someone sat in front of me and said, "Well, how do I mirror this with responsibility?" I would examine responsibility. Like, where does responsibility show up in your life? What's your relationship to responsibility? When did you first feel responsible? What did you feel responsible for? Why is responsibility so heavy? It also feels very, 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 very controlling. I don't think we have a responsibility really to anything or anyone other than ourselves, and I don't mean that in a I really don't mean that in a self-centered way, in the sense that we'd have no obligation to our children. I mean, you talked about your little guy, making the faces, and then we just, oh, you mean I don't have to be responsible for anymore? He just can eat and fend for himself. That's not really what I mean. But people often say, "What's your best parenting advice?" And I say, "Well, number one is no matter what you do, you're going to screw your kids up." And what I mean by that is to take the perfection away of having to be perfect and knowing no matter what you do, hug them too much, never hug them at all. They're going to need therapy, but always be there for them, but just not necessarily need to be in control of making it perfect. And the second thing, as I'll always say to people, is be the best version of you. Mine your story, uncover any type of unlived life or potential inside of you and bring that to the world. And your kid gets to see that every single day. I mean, you don't know how you practicing a talk is going to shape your child's life. Some people are sitting in a room where their parents are watching television. Your kid is being goofy and making faces while his mom practices a talk that she gets to give in front of 20 people or 10,000 people. Those numbers don't really matter. We don't even have any even sense of how that can reconcile itself within a child and how that can impact their life in 20 or 30 or 40 years from now. So for me, I think we have a moral responsibility to be the best version of who we can be, to make the biggest impact of all of those people around us, rather than feeling responsible to diminish who we are, to dim our light in order to be there for other people. I would say that we need to be very careful how we use the word responsibility and why we choose to be responsible for people. Often we use our children and responsibilities as a reason, or dare I say it, an excuse not to go out and take chances on ourselves. And I think that's if that's the case, if that's the reason for responsibility, then that's tragic. I've also worked with people who have disabled children at home and who have financial constraints, and there's different types of challenges and responsibilities there. But the same principle applies. You can always find space to work on yourself and to work on your own dreams and your aspirations and to lift everybody up accordingly.
Did you ever fall trapped to this yourself?
Oh, God, yeah. My responsibility was to save everybody, That's just one tiny little responsibility. My responsibility was to make enough money so then I could have the freedom to go and do what I really wanted to do, which was a flawed story that I told myself, which wasn't true. Um, I still feel responsibility sometimes, but when responsibility kicks into my life, I feel overwhelmingly trapped in a creative context, and I feel limited in what's possible in my life. Um, so the way I would look at it in terms of my own family, if I work with somebody in terms of I do a little exercise called isolated dreaming, where I get someone to begin to dream about what's possible for their lives. And sometimes we'll do a full on painting, sometimes it's a drawing, and I'll ask them to leave their children aside. And they go, but little Johnny's like 6 and Mary, they're real people. And I go, no, I know they are. But the minute you start to contemplate what's possible for your life through the lens of your children, your wife, your partner, your husband, your boyfriend, you're limiting what's possible for your life immediately. So what I ask people to do is to begin to dream, and I bring them through a process, and then we might result in some sort of visual expression of this is what I want for my life. And then and only then do we start to bring the considerations of those people back into the equation. And inevitably, people see the possibilities differently than they would have if they'd brought them in earlier in the process. So if I think about moving geographically, I think about Switzerland,
Yes.
and I'm sure Switzerland's not covered in the entire country is covered in snow, even some of the year, most of the year. But I might think about Switzerland. I go, well, Charlie hates the snow, and Maggie, my daughter, well, she loves the sun, and okay, so then I can't do there, and I can't go there. My wife is this, and I just leave all that aside and I just focus on what it is that I want. And then I bring them in. And what I find is it gives me tremendous clarity, better language to be able to explain it to them and why I need this in my life and why I need to be able to bring my work to the world. And then it turns out that the things I thought they were really attached to, they're not that attached to at all, really. They go, cool, Dad, let's do that. I want to go to Mexico and spend 6 weeks in January and the beginning of February. Last year it was a need and then it was a want. And my kids resisted it. And then I explained it differently one day and they said, oh, I didn't know that, Dad. Let's do it. Let's give it a go. And they loved it.
Hmm. It's interesting because I think going back to what you said about excuses, perhaps sometimes we do have the clarity and we do know what we want. We just don't give ourselves permission to
Mm,
actually explore it. And then
yeah.
it's also masked by the fear of what will happen if we do take action.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's easy to use your mom and your dad, and I say this with love and respect because again, somebody somewhere will listen to this, and their circumstances are uniquely different, and their parents are disabled, or they've been in a crash, or they're sick, or they're dying, or whatever. And obviously, I'm categorizing this in a slightly more generic, general terms. But often people will say, "Well, I'd do this if I didn't have children," for example, and I go, "So, what was your excuse when you didn't have children, or is this just a new?" debilitating feeling. And I said, no, actually, I've always had this feeling, Philip, to be honest with you. I said, so why are you using your kids? Do they know that you're using them? What kind of resentment will you build up towards them that you're unaware of because they're the reason to take you and deprive you from the thing? And then you'll find there's another layer where, well, I'm scared and I'm a bit uncertain and I'm not sure exactly what it looks like and I don't have the business model in my head. And then you'll get down to the other reasons where actually that's bullshit as well, and you'll find a couple of things. One is they're crystal clear in what it is, or two is this is a smoke screen. This is actually just a fabricated dream that they haven't clarified. Ultimately, so they can stay stuck here, so they don't have to realize what lies beyond that, which is the next mountain, which is actually glorious and lit up beautifully. But they can't see that because they have to, live this dream first, which they're not getting to. And then you come to the glorious pit of darkness and despair, which is, what if I try this, which is the greatest expression of who I am? This is my greatest dream. What if I run the risk and go after that and it doesn't work? I don't
Mm.
just fail as a person, as a mother, as a man, or as a woman, as Shannon, as Philip. I fail at the core of who I am. And that's why most people stay away from the real expression and the real dreams. And that's why some of the greatest artists in the world that we all know, many of them went to their deathbed with their greatest music, their greatest art, their greatest expression inside them because they were afraid to paint that one painting. They
Oh
were afraid
yeah.
to write one poem. They were afraid to say that one line because we care too deeply what others think.
Oh, absolutely. You know, a key word that stood out to me in what you just said is resentment. And I think we often don't notice that actually, or don't, because I think resentment is something that can build up over
Mm,
time of not setting boundaries, of not expressing your needs and quietly pushing it back down. But at some point, that voice becomes too loud.
mm,
And as you said that, I reflected on actually my own experience growing up with my mum, who I think really used us as an excuse to not go after her dreams. And a consequence was that she had a lot of resentment and that we felt that too, because then it was, I've sacrificed so much for you. And that would be
wow.
the narrative. It would always be framed in that way of like, I've done this for you. But I think in many respects it's an excuse. And we can see it with love and compassion and everything.
Mm.
But I think it's a really common one. And it is a huge, yeah, it has a lot of negative consequences.
Let's just play. I'll depersonalize it for the purposes of what you shared, and I really appreciate. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm struck by the enormity of the burden that that may have created for you. But let's just depersonalize it for a second. Let's just say someone had a parent that said the same thing, that I've sacrificed so much. I was a workaholic because I wanted to provide for you and everything else. With respect, that's bullshit. Workaholism is not an addiction to work. It's just an inability to be at home. It's an uncomfortableness to be within our own skin or within the confines of a home or connection. But if someone burdens somebody with that, I'm always curious about the story, the origin story, and what it actually meant, what meaning we placed on it. And again, I'm depersonalizing this, but let's just say we have Jenny, and Jenny heard this story, and her brother John heard this story, and they heard that their mother, their father sacrificed so much for them. And then fast forward, and this is I'm going to play a little bit what you shared. We fast forward to this idea of fun, but there's no place for fun because my parents sacrificed their entire life to give me an opportunity. So therefore, I don't put a value on fun. I don't put a value on Bollywood dancing in my room with the coins in my pocket. I give that up pretty quick, smart, even though it brings me joy. And it allows me to access creativity within myself, which ultimately yields the greatest results, the greatest ideas, the greatest giftedness inside of me, and some of the greatest inspiration that I can bring to the world to impact the world. But we kill the spontaneity of fun because it has no value because my parents put such an enormous burden on my shoulders. So I'm playing with that a little bit just to point out whether it's relevant to you or not is not the point. What these stories mean to us, and that's why I put such a massive focus when someone wants to focus on the future. I start with their past, and every time we do this and someone gives me believes in this and they trust me with this invitation to bring them back into their past, every time we go back into their past, we look at their present, we build a bridge to how their past has created their present, and then we contemplate their future always looks different. What they want looks different, how they're going to get it looks different, and the nuances that are at play to conspire to help or diminish what they want and deserve in this world are at play, and they can start to see that. I think the past has created so much clarity for us, and yet most of us in society want to just focus on the future, or we want to live in the now. And I think that is a catastrophic mistake. I think some of the greatest gold and diamonds and whatever other analogy you want to use is actually in our past if you know how to mine it in a really productive manner without getting lost and stuck in the past. That's not what I'm talking about.
Or living too much in regret of what could have been or should have been or what you
Exactly.
could have done differently. Yeah.
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 100%.
Yeah, I think you sharing that also made me just have a bit of an epiphany around the sense of responsibility. And I think for anyone maybe who's been in a similar position, it could really exacerbate your fear of failure or your fear of making the wrong choice
Mhm.
because you've been put in this position where it's like there's a lot on you, resting on you to be the
Yeah.
person you're supposed to be, the good boy,
Yeah.
the good girl.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We could
Mm.
spend we could spend a whole podcast just on that.
Yeah.
Just on that. And when I say just, I don't mean it's insignificant. I mean just as in it's so important and such a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can see that. So you say that in this quest for clarity, we should look at what our gifts are and not our talents.
Correct.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm going to use my wife as a story that's very close to home. My wife, was working as an accountant and making good money and climbing the corporate ladder. But she had success on paper, but she wasn't satisfied. So what's missing? What's missing? Maybe multiple things. Maybe she was dating me, so that was part of the problem. But on a serious note, what was missing was that she was executing purely based on an ability and a kind of a talent or a learned ability, and maybe even naturally inclined to be good with numbers. But then if you go back into her past and you begin to understand what created, this is why the past is really important. You go back into her past and they weren't on the breadline, but they weren't rich. So they would be, poor in essence. They didn't have a lot of treats. They didn't get a lot of Christmas presents. They weren't starving, but they certainly weren't abundant. And her goal was to make sure that she had enough money and freedom, and she wanted to get out of the geographical location she was living in, which was a rural part of Ireland at the time. She went to her career guidance person. He looked at her results and said, "Well, the thing that stands out is maths. You're really good with numbers. What does your sister do? She's an accountant. How much does she get paid? Well, 35,000 euros a year back in the day or whatever. Oh, right. Well, one and one equals two. Well, it doesn't really because it's not the full equation. Where, if anywhere, did anyone, including her career guidance person or even Pauline, my wife herself, go, yeah, but what about joy? What about aliveness? What about vibrancy? What about meaning? What about impact? What about something that brings me alive? That just wasn't part of the equation. And that's okay. So she then fast forward. She's about 30, 35 years old. She's climbing the corporate ladder, but she's not satisfied. She's drinking a bit too much because she's trying to numb it out. She doesn't want to address it. She thinks it's as good as it gets. She meets me, who's a complete pain in the ass because I'm just a bit of a rebel. I won't settle in life. I keep challenging the status quo. I keep changing careers until I find out what it is that lights me up. And then I change that every 5 years to make sure it continues to light me up. And I start challenging her and go, I don't think you're fulfilled. I think you're executing your talent, which is your numbers. But nowhere in the world or does the world get to see any type of giftedness. And her attitude was, well, I don't have a gift. I don't have anything. It turns out that she has her own traumatic story, as we all do, and we
Mm,
compare it in society. And as she got more and more and more in touch with her story, she started to realize actually it's really important for her to eradicate the suffering that she had, even if it's for one woman in the world, but it may be thousands, as part of her mission in life. And then she started to move into this space where she started to examine her story to bring up a more gifted approach to life rather than a talented approach to life. And eventually, she not just stopped being an accountant, but the day where I knew she was really serious was when she resigned her designation, because then there was no going back. Because at that point, as well, what if this doesn't work out, whatever this is, I can always go back to accounting. And to me, that's where the Vikings did one thing really well, except for pillage Ireland, but they would get to land and they would burn their boats. So there was no going back. And I
mm,
think there's something magical in just declaring what it is you do want or what it is you don't want. If that's as good as you have, it's still clarity. Burning that ship, some would say it's irresponsible. I disagree because I would be a hypocrite if I said that shouldn't be at least an option. Burn the ship, declare it to the world, and now what is she doing? She's now helping me and supporting our community and building experiences that change people's lives, that bring out their full potential, that address the things that she didn't address 20 or 30 years ago, to make sure that people are as aligned as possible when it goes to career decisions and opening up businesses and making an impact in the world. And now she's using the pain that she went through and brought her gift out into the world to eradicate that suffering for as many people as she can before she dies, which I think is the ultimate goal, I think, for every human. I think that
yeah,
is our purpose.
yeah. Beautiful, beautiful story there. And something that comes to mind with that is I think it's a common question for people in terms of should I have a plan B? Should I keep my options open? I need to have something to fall back on. And that's often what makes people scared to take the leap. And yet, there can be a big energy leakage through staying midway,
Yeah,
through not committing, not going all in. And it's a way of s- managing your fear, but it's probably diminishing your success.
100%. And here's another pattern I see. And I'm just going to stick with coaching because it's something I get asked a lot. People say to me, I want to coach and I'd love to start coaching. And the first person they'll ask to coach, the first person they'll approach to coach will tell you everything about their future. Often they'll go to their brother, who they don't get on particularly well with, who's not coachable and has never listened to anything they've ever said, and they take him on as their first client. Why do they do that? Not because they want the toughest client to crack, to grow, but they want to make sure that they can validate the story inside of them that they're not good enough, they're not a good enough coach, and that ultimately this is not for them. When I got down on one knee on a beautiful beach in the west coast of Ireland to ask my wife to marry her, I didn't have another woman at the end of the beach in case my wife said no. So I think
You didn't?
no, I didn't. I didn't. I mean, I wasn't, definitely didn't. I was just about got my wife to say yes. And I think the ocean was on one side and I was on the other. So I don't think she had a choice. But, but joking aside, I think this idea of having a plan B is bullshit because I think it's a way for us to diminish the possibility of the only plan. There should only be one plan. There only is one plan, whether it's the universe for you, God, whatever you believe. And our job is to find out what that plan is and to make adjustments and to experiment and to keep moving. And I think the pursuit of that plan and the pursuit of that journey is so valuable. And the thing that I think people put the least amount of focus on is what is the cost of not pursuing it? People say, oh, but this is
Confronting
hard work.
question.
How's that?
Confronting question, I'm sure.
What is the cost of not changing? What
What
is
is
the
the
cost of
cost of
not
not
pursuing?
changing? Yeah. I am gonna move into the final fast few questions now, Philip, and the first thing I wanted to ask you is what is some of the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, wow. The best advice I've ever received.
Mm.
I think it's the young man at the wedding that you've got a gift. And just somebody saying that to me encouraged me to gave me a belief that there was something deeper inside of me. And I think that if that's the ultimate, that is the biggest piece of advice I've ever been given.
Mm. Do you think it's because it shone light on something you already knew? It just sort of lit it up?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't discredit as best I could, or best I tried. I was hard to discredit a complete stranger, and yet most of us would think it's the absolute opposite. But I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice. And I heard a quote recently. I'm not a big fan of quotes because I think quotes. I love to know who the quote's coming from and how aligned that person is living that quote, or are they just spouting it out and it just sounds kind of sexy. But somebody said, and sorry, I don't remember who said it, but somebody said, "You can have everything you want in life as long as
Just
you
not
have
all at
enough."
once?
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
that?
No, not that one. You can have everything you want in life as long as you help enough people get what they want in life. Something on those lines. And I sat with that and I went, that is really amazing when you think about that. My job is to help as many people as possible. I am that guy at the wedding. I've become the guy at the wedding. I'm the guy that sees something in you that you cannot or will not see in yourself. And I am fucking ruthless in my pursuit of that in both a compassionate and a kind of an asshole way on occasion if required, because I care so deeply in humanity and people's ability to uncover that gift. I have literally become that person. Um, so to me, as I do that, I live my gift and I feel I'm being gifted in the world every day. So that quote is actually very true and
Yeah.
it's playing out in my life.
Mhm. And note, even to sum this all up, really, in respect to clarity and choosing the next right step in your life, the importance of service, because you'll
Mhm.
never find the happiness, fulfillment, and meaning you're looking for if what you are doing does not make a contribution in a positive way to people around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Second, what is some of the worst advice you have received?
A happy wife is a happy life.
What is that? That just makes me think of some dodgy, I don't know, sign that you get in a pub and someone sticks it on their garage or
I know, I know. I had a go at this statement a couple of years ago, and that was quite a bit of outrage. But I think that it's this idea that if your partner's happy and you keep your partner happy, which is not my job, not what I signed up for, and quite frankly, not what she signed up for. But this idea that if your partner's happy, everything will be okay, and it's just not true. And I think a lot of us pour a lot of energy and effort into keeping our partners happy, so we don't have to actually address our own journeys in the world. But that's just one piece of advice. A lot of these stereotypical statements in the world, which are seen as advice. And to me, that was just one that continually drives me nuts.
Mm, fair enough. And to finish up, Philip, what are some final words that you want to share, given what we've spoken about, to all the people who maybe are at a crossroads in their life, know that they're not doing exactly what they know they should be doing? There is a deeper calling there, whether that be in work or in relationships or some other area of life. What is a final message you'd share with them?
There's only one message, and I think it was sparked by you and I just having a really brief chat at the beginning. And this idea of people at a crossroads in life, and they're wondering what's next, and if they've got language like, I don't know what's next, I'm not sure, I'm afraid to make the wrong decision, I'm afraid to fail, I don't know, I, there's one word in all of those statements, and it's I or me. And this sounds really cold, but with the greatest respect in the world, I would ask you to stop making it about you, because that's what we do in those moments. We make it about us. We make it about, what if it works for me? What if it doesn't work for me? What will I experience? And when I made this shift in my head, and I still fall back a little bit sometimes, but if I say, I stop making this journey about me, and when I wake up and I have doubt, and I get riddled with doubt sometimes, and I wonder, are people going to come? And I wonder, am I doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? And when I stop and I go, how am I here to serve others? That gives me, I'm here for other people. So stop making it about you, and just give yourself permission to contemplate for one moment, just one, that the move that you make is not about you. It's actually for humanity. That actually it'll inspire somebody else. It will move the needle for somebody else, whether it's your kids or whatever it happens to be. And that is the greatest source of courage that I bring into my life every single day.
Powerful. Powerful, and a great way to finish up. Philip, thank you so much. Thank you for your wisdom, for your stories, for your, I don't know, about 25 F bombs.
Oh God, sorry
Like
about that.
like a good like a good Irishman. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate you sharing some of your own personal stuff as well.
Mm,
Thank you.
you're welcome.